Good day, sir, and everyone. We are the Group 1, and this is the topic that we're discussing today: control chart, process capability, and SPC software applications in total quality management. But before that, let me introduce to you our group team. Number one, me as a group leader, Earl Benedict M. Santos, together with my group mates Jericho Comangon, Jan Polayug, Daryl Robles, and John Lawrence Linyas. And our agenda for today, number one, is introduction. Number two, control chart. Number three, defining what is control chart and the types of variation, the key elements of a control chart, the X bar and R chart equations and examples, attribute data control chart, defects and defectives, and choosing an attribute chart, the NP, P, and C, and U charts. Number four, the process capability. And number five, defining what is CP and CPK, PP and PPK. And number six, the SPC software applications. And number seven, defining what is SPC software applications. And number eight, summary. And number nine is the conclusion. Introduction. In total quality management or TQM, it ensures consistent product quality and process efficiency. Key tools that helps achieve these goals include control charts, process capability analysis, and software applications. Control charts monitors process performance over time. Process capability assesses how well a process meets the specifications of customer requirements consistently, and SPC software helps automate and analyze quality data. Together, these tools help support effective decision making and continuous improvement in total quality management. And what is control chart? The control chart is a powerful statistical tool that is used to monitor, control, and improve the process performance over time by detecting variations in the procedures. It is also called the Shewhart chart or process behavior chart. This shows the graphical representation of the process over time with control limits to monitor whether the process is stable or consistent over time in control, or if there are parts that need to be investigated, the signs of abnormal variations out of control. And the purpose of this control chart in TQM is to detect variations to differentiate the common causes that are natural and acceptable variation, and special cause variations that are unexpected results or unstable processes that are not consistent over time. First, the two types of variation. First, we will see here the common cause variation. We will see that the process are the same and stable process and consistent over time, while the special cause variation, we can um, see here that the process are not consistent or unstable process. And the key elements of a control charts, the control limits create the boundaries between common cause variation and special cause variation. To to be easy understand that the upper control limit, the lower control limit, will see if the process are common cause variation or special cause variation. And in the third picture, the key elements of a control chart, we will see there the upper class and lower class, the that broken lines and yung that lines that you will see there the special cause variation outside of the upper class and lower class limit, and sorry, the control limits. And we will see in the middle the normal process variation, and we will see the process that first the that is it's like going upward, and you will see there the red at the outside of the upper class limit, and that that is the special cost variation that needs to be investigated or to be monitored by the experts to see the problem in that process. The rational subgrouping, a rational subgroup is defined as a collection of units that are all produced under the same conditions. And the upper control limit then the for x bar is equals to upper plus x bar is equals to grand average plus A2 R. Then later we will understand the A2, the constant variable for that, and this is the example of the equations to get um, the grand average. By only including the normal inherent process variation in our rational subgroup, we ensure that our control limits are appropriately sensitive to special cost variation. Here we will see the X bar and R chart equations. The X bar chart monitors the mean of the process, and the range or R chart monitors the variation within the process. This is the sample formula to get the um, center line, yung grand average or the center line of our X bar. This is the process. And grand X bar yung center line equals to grand average equals to X, or grand average is equals to, and that is the um, formula to get the center line, and the upper class, then the upper control limit, then the lower control limit. That is the formula. In the range chart, to get the average range, this is the formula that R bar is equals to, ayun, that is the formula to get the average range. And you will see in the chart the sample number of um, the defects. The defects in day 1 is that is the total to monitor the process if it's to know if there is a special cost variation or common cost variation. In the second picture, we will see here the X bar and R chart constants. And previously, we see the A2. The meaning of A2 in the X bar and R chart constants is you will see that in X bar and R chart subgroup or sample size, the example is number 4. And number 4, we will see the um, variance factor or ay, A2. A2 A2 is equals to um, 1.23. Example, that only 3 sample size, that we will get the 1.23. And we can also estimate population standard deviation, and the variance factor of that sample is subgroup sample size is not is equals to 4, then the constant of it in D2 is 2.59. And in the third picture, these are the X bar and R chart example, and we will see that our subgroup in the first column is equals to 10, then the sample is 3, and the X bar average and the R range. You will see at the bottom the calculation of it. To get the grand average, we will use our previous formula to get it. This um, and we will all sum the X bar average to get the center line or the grand average, and we will divide it into 10 because our subgroup sample is equals to 10, and the result is 7.7. And in the X bar chart we will put there um, the grand average or the center line. Then we will also get the range center line, and to get it we will use our previous formula that we discussed, and there is the formula, and also sum all of them, the R or range um, values that we get. And to get the x bar average example in our subgroup 1, in number 1, sample 1, 7 plus 4 plus 4 is equals to 15. Then divide it into 3 because our sample is 3. We get the 5.0 in the first example in subgroup number 1. And to get the range, the subgroup, um, the sample, the 3 sample, we will get the maximum and the minimum. Then subtract it. Then we will get a 3 because 7 minus 4 is equals to 3. And in the sample subgroup number 2, 6 plus 3 plus 8 is equals to and 5, 7. And we will get the range by getting the maximum and minimum number of our sample. X minus 3 is equals to 5. And all of them just the same process to get. And after we get all the range, we will compute it at the bottom to get the range center line, and we will all sum the the value that we get, the 3 plus 5 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 3 plus 3, and so on. And we divide it into 10 because our subgroup is 10. And the total of it is 3.7. And we will put it on our range chart to, put the center line. And to get the upper control limit and lower control limit, we will proceed into the fourth picture. And we will see here the, the formula. And we will just only follow the formula. In example, in our upper control limit, we will see here that the 7.7, which is the grand average for the X bar chart, and plus 1.23 that we get in 1.23 that we get into X bar and R chart constants, which is A2 A2 is equals to 1.23. We will see in the second picture the X bar and R chart constants that our sample is equals to 3, and we will get it by um, to see the constants and 1.023 to get, and multiply it in our range center line or in our range. And after we multiply it, we will receive the results, and we will put it in our chart to get the upper control limit. And in the lower control limit, here are the formula, and also the same values, but the you will see and notice that the symbol, that plus, and in our lower control limit, it is minus now to get the lower control limit. And we sum them up, and we get the total of it, the 3.9. And also in the range upper control limit, you will see here the D4. D4 is equals to in our X bar and R chart constants, D4 is equals to 2.575, and we put here, and we multiply it in the range that we get, or the center line, and total them, and we get the 9.53. And to get the lower control limit, we will see here the D3 R bar, and the D3 is equals to 0, and 0. And next slide, and we will see here the result, all that we get previously. And we get the X bar chart upper control limit, which is 11.5, and the lower control limit is equals to 3.9, and the center line, which is 7.7. And we put the X bar average into this chart. Example, the 5.0, 5.7, then 10.3, then 6.3, and so on. And also in range chart, you will see there the upper control limit is equals to 9.53, and the lower control limit is equals to 0, and the center line is 3.7. And we just put all the value that we get in the value that we get in the range. An example is the 3, 5, 3, 4, and so on. And in the next slide, we will watch the video to understand it more. Next slide.
Hey there, Andy Robertson here with CQE Academy, and in today's video I want to go through some of the fundamental concepts in control charts and then talk about one of the most popular control charts out there, the X bar and R chart. Alright, let's head over to the computer and dive in.
Alright, let's go ahead and get into it. What I'm showing here is kind of the agenda for today's lecture. So I'm going to start with talking about the two types of variation. So the beauty of a control chart is that it helps us distinguish between special and common cause variation. That's exactly why we use them. So I want to talk about what those things are. And then we're briefly going to talk about the key elements of a control chart. These are those unique features of a control chart that help us distinguish between normal and special cause variation. And then there's a really important topic in control charts called rational subgrouping, so I want to talk about that. And then we're going to go through both the equations associated with our control chart, so we're going to talk about the X bar and R chart, and we're going to talk about the equations we use to calculate the center line and the upper and lower control limit of both the X bar and the R chart. And then we're going to talk through some constants, so being able to work those equations requires that you use some constants. So I'm going to show you how to look those up and use those in your X bar and R chart calculations. And then we're going to do an example. So I'm going to show you exactly how to create an X bar and R chart. By the way, I've added timestamps to each of these different slides. So if you already understand types of variation or the key elements of a control chart or maybe rational subgrouping, you can kind of jump ahead to that particular timestamp. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the two types of variation. Every process, no matter what we're talking about, has two types of variation. The first is common cause variation. This is the inherent, normal, random variation associated with your process that every process experiences when it's in control. And I'm talking about every type of process, a manufacturing process, an administrative process, maybe it's a healthcare process. It doesn't matter what it is. Every process has some random, normal, common variation associated with it. Now, special cause variation is different and are things that are not unique to the process. So maybe you have a piece of equipment that's starting to wear out over time, or maybe a vendor ships you some non-conforming material, or maybe you have an operator that's new and is operating the machine differently. That's special cause variation. And as quality engineers or continuous improvement experts, we want to make sure we're monitoring our process and making sure that our processes are only experiencing common cause variation. Because if we're experiencing special cause variation, we should do an investigation. We should uncover the root causes of those special cause variations, and we should work to eliminate special cause variation. Now, the way we identify special cause variation versus common cause variation is by using a control chart. And so what you'll see here is every control chart has these upper and lower control limits. These control limits create the boundaries, you can see it here, between common cause variation and special cause variation. So we've got our upper and lower control limits here in red, and we're plotting our data here, and everything that falls between the upper and lower control limits is generally considered normal process variation. Now, what happens is, as we're plotting our data, if we run into a data point like this, that should be a sign that perhaps we're experiencing some special cause variation. And this is exactly how control charts work. We have control limits, and when we're outside of those control limits, we're likely experiencing special cause variation. Now, there are some other rules you can apply to control charts to identify special cause variation, but as just a general rule, we do use those control limits to identify a special cause from common cause. All right, so rational subgrouping. This is a really important concept in control charts. So a rational subgroup is defined as a collection of units that are all produced under the same conditions. Now, let me tell you why that's important. So the upper and lower control limits for the X-bar chart includes the average range, okay? So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Let's say we have an X-bar chart, and we have a subgroup sample size of 5. So every time we take a subgroup, we take 5 measurements. And within each measurement, within each subgroup, we're calculating a range value. Okay, we're calculating a range value. Now, this range value is eventually used to calculate the upper control limit for X bar. And so let's imagine we're taking this subgroup here. And let's say we take the first 3 data points, and then we do like a tooling change, or we change vendor lots, and we take the next 2 data points. Okay, that would be an example of poor rational subgrouping because we've made an inherent change. Okay, so when we're creating our control limits, we should make sure to collect data that's all produced under the same conditions, because if the range associated with our subgroup is large, the control limit for our X-bar chart is also going to be large. And if we have wide control limits, then we're not going to be as sensitive to changes in the variation. So the key here is that when we're picking our rational subgroup, we should only include normal inherent process variation in that rational subgroup. That's how we distinguish between common cause variation and special cause variation, because we're only including common cause variation in this R-bar value, okay? And then the X-bar and R-chart equations. So as you probably know, the X-bar chart monitors the mean or the average value of your process. And here are those equations for calculating the center line and the control limit of the X-bar chart. So the center line of your process is simply just called X double bar. This is the grand average, and it's really just the average of all of our average values. Now the upper control limit of X bar, so that's how you read this, upper control limit of X bar is that grand average, that X double bar, plus A2 times R bar. Now in the next slide, I'll talk about A2, how to find that A2 factor. And then the lower control limit is that same grand average, simply minus the A2 factor times R bar. And then the range chart. So the range chart in the X bar and R chart monitors the variation within your process. So special cause variation can either change the mean value of your process, or it can change the variation of your process. And we want to monitor both of those things to be able to detect special cause variation. Now here are the equations associated with the R chart. So the R bar, or the average range value, is simply just the average value of our measured ranges. And then the upper control limit of the range chart is the D4 factor times R bar, and the lower control limit is the D3 factor times R bar. Now I've thrown a lot of constants at you, so let's talk about that next. These are the X bar and R chart constants. So here are those equations we just talked about, and here's a table showing you all of the constants for the X bar and R chart. Now let's walk through these. So remember, for the upper and lower control limits of X bar, we use the A2 factor. So here's that A2 factor. And the way we find the right value is we look up the subgroup sample size. So in our example today, our subgroup sample size is going to be 3, and our A2 factor is going to be 1.023. But if in each of your rational subgroups you're taking 5 or 7 or 9 or 10, you just select a different A2 value. And then for your range chart, these are your two range factors, D3 and D4. So again, in today's example, when our subgroup sample size is 3, our D3 value is going to be 0, and our D4 value is 2.575. And again, the way to look this up is just to come over here to your subgroup sample size, and then move across and find the right factor. And then the last thing to talk about is estimating the population standard deviation. So we'll actually talk about this when we talk about process capability, but we can take this R bar value from our range chart and convert it into an estimate of the population standard deviation. And we use that using this D2 factor here, this D2 factor. So again, we look this up the same way. We find our subgroup sample size, we come across, we find that conversion factor to convert our R bar value into an estimate of the population standard deviation. All right, so now let's work an example. So in this example, we're going to have 10 subgroups, and each subgroup is going to have 3 samples. So our subgroup sample size is 3. And what we do is we take our first subgroup data, and we have sample values of 7, 4, and 4. And then what we do is we take that subgroup data, and we calculate the average value and the range. So 7 plus 4 plus 4 is 15, divided by 3 is 5, so that's our average value. And the range is simply just the max minus the min, so 7 minus 4 is 3. We can do that for all of our subgroups. So here our average value is 5.7, and our range is 5. Here it's 10.3 and 3. Here it's 6.3 and 4, and we can go on all the way down the list for all of our 10 subgroups. Now, once we have all of this data, we can calculate the grand average, which is X double bar, and that's simply just the average value of all of these subgroup averages, and it happens to be 7.7. And then what we can do is we can take that data and we can graph the beginnings of our X bar and R chart. So here in green, you can see the center line of our process. This is our grand average. That's 7.7. And then each of these data points is simply just the average value of the subgroups. So it's 5.0, 5.7, 10.3, 6.3, 9, 6, and on and on and on. We can do the same thing for the range chart. So we can find our R bar, the range center line, which is simply just the average value of all of our ranges. So if we find the average value here, it's 3.7, and we can use that to create the beginnings of our range chart. So again, the center line of our range chart is 3.7, and then you can just see we're plotting the data. So 3, 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 3, and on down the list. Here you can see how we've just simply plotted those range values on the R chart. And now it's time to calculate our control limits. So here are those equations for the upper and lower control limit. So we've got X bar here and the range chart here, and we can look up those constants that we just talked about to calculate the final control limits. So our subgroup sample size is 3, right? We're taking 3 samples per subgroup. And we know our A2 factor, our D3 factor is 0. You can see our D4 and our D2 factor. Now all we got to do is plug these in. The upper control limit is 11.5. Lower control limit is 3.9. Now remember, these are both for the X bar chart. And then for the range chart, we plug in those D3 and D4 factors. The upper control limit is 9.3 and the lower control limit is 0. Now what we can do is we can take those control limits and overlay them on the data. So you can see here we've added the upper control limit and the lower control limit, and it looks like our process is in control, right? We don't have any data outside the control limits. Same thing for the range chart. So we take that previous data where we had plotted each of our range points, and we can overlay the control limits, so 9.3 and 0. And again, it looks like our range values are within the control limits. All right, that is it. That is how you create an X bar and R chart using the equations and the constants.
All right, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button so other people just like you can find this exact same content. And if you loved it and you want to take this journey to become a CQE, hit that subscribe button so as I publish new material, it gets sent to you and you get to grow with me on this journey to become a CQE. All right, that's it. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Now, we will proceed to the next topic, the attribute data control chart examples. First, we will distinguish between the difference between the defect versus defective. A defective is an entire unit that fails to meet specifications, while a defect is an undesirable condition within a unit. If a unit has a defect on it, defective unit, it is a defective unit. And we will see here the bulb. If the bulb is the glass are broken, it is defective, and a defect is a defect. We will see here the car pinto car, and we will see the defect here, the scratches, bubbles, and runs, and that is the defect. And the defective is the glass that are broken or the wirings inside this bulb. And um, knowing the differences between these two are important to choose the data control chart. And in choosing an attribute control charts, um, and the reason this distinction is important is because it changes the way to select control charts. And there are two variables that have to consider when choosing the right control chart. The first is what type of data are counting and collecting. And if we're counting defectives, that would be a different control chart. That if we were counting defects, example, that if we are counting um, defects or defect, we will um, see here the constant and the variable, and defect and defective, that is the type. And the sample size, whether the sample size is constant or variable, and again it changes the type of control that we use. And the first type of control chart that we're going to talk about is the most basic. It is the NP chart. NP chart is a trending of defectives with a constant sample size or count of defectives. You will see at the bottom defective, and to get the NP, we need a sample size constant, and that is NP chart. And in P chart, these are the trending of defectives with a variable sample size. And defective again, but the sample size now are variable. And percent, you will get here the percent defectives. And in C chart, these are the trending of defects with a constant sample size or count of defects at U chart, and these are the trending of defects with a variable sample size to get the percent defects. And at the third picture, choosing an attribute control charts, and the NP charts trend to number or of defectives at the mat in base in the binomial distribution, which operates under the assumption that every unit inspected can only be counted as bad one time. And the U chart and C chart utilize the Poisson distribution because they trend the number of defects where it is possible for each item inspected to contain multiple defects. Next slide. Now, these are the NP chart. The NP chart is used when trending defectives with a constant sample size. Here we will see the formula to get the NP center line. Here we will see the sum of all defectives, divide number of subgroups, and we will see the um, procedure that we get at the table. We will see there the count of defective units, and we will all sum them up. Example 12 plus 20 plus 20 plus 6 and so on to get the 199, and we will put there at the top, and below of it we will divide it into the number of the subgroups, and the number of subgroups are 15, and if we total it we will get a 13.27 defective units per subgroup. And to get the p bar, um, this is the formula. Defective percent defective equals to sum of all defectives and sum of subgroup quantity sa subgroup size, or in the sample it says lot size, but the correct is subgroup size, and these are the value of it, and we put everything on it, and we will get the total of count of defective units. The sum of all defectives is 199 over 1800, which is the sum of subgroup size, and when we divide it we will get the 0.1106, or we will move it to decimal places to get the 11.06%. And to get the upper control limit, sorry, these are the formula, and um, the center line is equals to 13.27 plus 3, then then root, then square root 13.27, then 1 minus 0.1106, we will get the 23.58, and the lower control limit, that is the same, but we will notice the plus sign, it changed to minus sign in the lower control limit to get the lower control limit, which is 2.96. And when we put all of it in the chart, you will notice here in the second picture the center line, which is 13.27, then the upper control limit and the lower control limit to monitor if the process are in control or not in control or not consistent over time. But in this example, you will see here that the process are normal and in control. And at the next slide, next slide please. Now we will proceed at the next one, the C chart. The C chart is used when trending the number of defects per subgroup when the sample size is constant. You will see the formula here, the C bar is equals to center line. To get it, we will put all the sum of all defects and divide it in the number of subgroups. And this is simple, and these are the 95, which is we get in the count of defects, the sum of it, and we divide it into the number of subgroups, which is 20. You can see here in the lot, or here the subgroup or subgroups are 20, and that's it. And if we sum with and we total it, we will get the 4.75 defects per subgroup. And now here are center line. And to get the upper control limit, these are the formula, and we will only notice here that the plus sign we will change into minus sign, and 4.75, which is our center line, plus 3, then square root 4.75 equals to 11.23, and we multiply the 3 square root, or and then to get the 11.29, and in lower control limit, just the sign of addition is changed to subtraction. Then when we put the total of it in the chart, we will now see the center line or defects per subgroup is 4.75. These are the center line, and the upper control limit is equals to 11.29. Then the lower control limit is equals to 0. Here, 0. And that's it. And next is the U chart. The U chart is used to monitor a process for defects when the sample size varies. And these are the formula to get it. And sum of all defects, a center line equals to sum of all defects, divide sum of units inspected, and n bar is equals to average number of samples per group subgroup, sum of units inspected, number of subgroups, and this the bottom to get the control limits. This chart allows for control limits are dependent on the sample size, or n. Or if you have standard sample sizes, you can calculate multiple control limits for your frequently expected sample sizes. And you will notice at the second picture the chart or the sample. And to get the center line, U bar is equals to or center line is equals to sum of all defects divide sum of units inspected, and the sum of all defects is 117, and we just only sum the defects observed: 8 plus 10, 8 plus 10 plus 9 plus 6 plus 10 plus 5, and so on to get the 117. And we divide it into the sub or the total of this part, and you get the 1,560, and we total it and we get the center line 7.50% defects per subgroup. And when we get the U chart, always remember that we are getting here a percentage, and always put a percent on the total. And n bar is equals to sum of all, and so on, and these are the total of sample per subgroup. And here are the to get the 104, we just only get the lot size, or this part, the total of it, and the subgroup size, which is 15. We divide it and we get the 104 subgroup and sample per subgroup. And we see here at the bottom the upper control limit, and to get it we need this formula to get, and the 7.50, which is our um, center line, plus 3, then square root of 7.50% divide 104, which is our sample per subgroup, and we will get a 15.56%. And in lower control limit, we just only change the addition to subtraction to get the lower control limit, and we get the negative 0.56%. Then in our chart, we don't use negative, we just only put a 0% to it. And at the next slide please. At the next slide here, we will see a negative 0.20, and this is not correct. The correct is 0.0% only, and we will not use this, only 0.0%. And we just put here the number of the percentage defects, which is the 8.0, 8.3, 11.3, the 4.3, and so on, to monitor that if we are still in control in the process, or there are some parts in the process that are need to be observed by experts or the continuous improvements experts. And that's all, and we will proceed to the next part of this report, and I introduce to you Daryl Robles and Jericho Camangon to present the next part.
Process capability refers to a process ability to consistently produce outputs that meet quality standards and customer expectation by comparing its natural variation to set limits. Methods like CP and CPK assess how well a stable process fits within specification, while PP and PPK evaluate overall performance even for processes still being approved. These indicators help to identify whether a process needs adjustment or deeper improvements to meet quality goals in total quality management or TQM. Assessing process capability is crucial for guiding improvements, ensuring long-term quality assurance, and preparing for full-scale operations. It also plays a key role in reducing defects, minimizing waste, and streamlining production. Understanding process capability helps organizations to maintain consistency, boost customer satisfaction, and gain competitive edge in today's quality-driven market. So it's super helpful when you're trying to improve how things run. Understanding how capable of your process give you a solid starting point for making quality better, improving efficient, especially important in fields like manufacturing or engineering, where being consistent and dependable really counts. In a way, process capability is like giving your process process a regular checkup to make sure it's good shape and ready to perform. So next, process capability, CP and CPK. CP and CPK are statistical tools used to evaluate the capability of process in meeting specified limits. CP, or the Process Capability Index, measures the potential capability of a process by comparing the spread of the process variation to the width of the specification limits. It assumes that process is perfectly centered between the upper and lower specification limit. CPK, or the Process Capability Index, adjusted for centering, provides a more accurate assessment by considering how centered the process is. It evaluates the distance between the process mean and the nearest specification limit, offering insight into how the process is actually performing. In summary, CP reflects the theoretical capability of a process under the ideal conditions, while CPK indicates the actual performance by accounting for any shift in the process mean. So the main purpose of CPK is to value how capable and consist a process in producing outputs within defined specification limits. CP measures the potential capability by comparing the process spread to the specification range, assuming the process is centered. CPK, while provides a more realistic measure by factoring in how centered the process actually in how close it runs to the specification limits. This tool helps organizations to identify whether the process is stable, capable, and reliable over time. They are key factoring reducing defects, improving quality, minimizing variation, and supporting continuous improvement efforts like Six Sigma. Using CP and CPK allows the companies to make data-driven decisions, improve customer satisfaction, and maintain cost-effective operation. Oh, next. So process capability refers to inherent ability of process to produce similar parts or sustain under given set of conditions. So whether the process is stable. Because be- before we check the process capability, we need to make sure that the process is predictable and consistent over time. Because if it's unstable, it be hard for us to assess its capability or output. So data is normally distributed. The image shows a normal distribution where most data falls between the LSL and USL or lower specification limit or upper specification limit, meaning it is good. Data outside these limits are defects showed in red and highlights that our well-centered process has a fewer defects. So next. So next is process capability CP, CPK, and PPK. So this formula we use to calculate the upper specification and lower specification for CP and CPK. So upper specification and lower specification process with Six Sigma. So USL minus LSL over Six Sigma. Next. So this is the example number 1. A process has a mean of 45.5 and standard deviation of 0.9. The product has a specification of 45.5 plus minus 3.0. So find the CPK in CPK. So the formula for the CP is USL minus LSL or the upper specification limits minus the lower specification limit divided by 6 sigma. So LSL, so 45.5 minus the product specification, which is the 3.0, is equal to 42. So the upper specification limit is 45.5 plus 3.0 is equal to 48. So next is we convert it to based on the given mean. So or standard deviation and products specification. So the upper control limit is 48 plus 3 based on the product's specification. And the lower control limit is 42, which is also reduced by 3.0 for production for both UCL and LCL. Then the 6 sigma is multiplied by standard deviation of 0.9. So 48 minus 42 is equal to 6. So then bring down. Then multiply 6 to 0.9 is equal to 5.4 divided by 6 is equal to 1.11. To calculate the CPK, we need to use this formula. So next is X, or the answer we obtain from the CP, minus the given mean and LSL or lower specification limit, and X gain minus the USL or upper specification limit. Then we convert them into the numbers to 45.5, which is the mean. Minus 42 is equal to 3.5. And 48 minus 45 is equal to 2.5. Then we get the answer for the lower limit, which is the 3.5, and divide it by 3. Then multiply by the standard deviation of 0.9. So 3 times 0.9 is equal to 2.7 for the upper limits. It's also 3 times 0.9, which is equal to 2.7. Then we get the answer for both lower and upper limits, which is our 3.5 and 2.5. So we divide it to 3.5 by the denominator of 2.7, which is equal to 1.3 for the upper limit. We also divide it to 2.5 by 2.7, which is equal to 0.93. So the CPK is mean is 1.3 or 0.93. So get the minimum for this number. So the minimum is 0.93. So in result, so this means the process output is not capable because it's only greater than or less than 1. If the output is below 1, if is below 1, it means it is the lower than required specification limits. This can lead to many rejected products, a lot of reworks needed, and the products will not meet quality specification and customer satisfaction. And industry trends. Industry trends and standards. Next. So this is the example number 2. A process has mean of 70.0 and standard deviation of 2.0. The product is given. Even the lower specification limit, is the 58, and USL is the upper specification limit, which is 82. So find the CP and CPK. So we use the formula again for the CP and CPK, which is the USL and LSL over the 6 sigma. So 82 minus 58 is equal to 24. So and then multiply the denominators, which is the 6 times 2.0 is equal to 12. So 20, then bring down. So 24 divided by 12 is equal to 2.0, which is the final answer for the CP. So for the CPK, use use again the formula. X minus the answer we get in the LSL and USL, or the lower and upper control limit. So the 70, which is the mean, minus in LSL, 70 minus 58 is equal to 12. Then multiply the denominator, which 3 times 12 is equal to 6. And 82 minus 70 is equal to 12 also. Then 3 times 2 is also 6, which is the answer we see in the presentation. So then 12 divided 6 is equal to 2.0. So the final answer is 2.0. So the output is, if the CPK is 2.0, it means there are almost no defects, indicating extremely high quality production. The process is very consistent and very well centered within the specification limits, and it meets industry standards and customer satisfaction.
Now, this is a difference between CP and PP and CPK and PPK. The first one is CP and CPK, process capability metrics. The sample is sample, short-term, future. They are based on a sample of data, and they focus on the short-term behavior of process, meaning under ideal controlled conditions. They predict the future capability of the process if everything stay consistent. Meaning, CP tells you how capable a process could be if it's perfectly centered. CPK shows how capable the process actually is, considering how off center it might be. While the PP and PPK, or process performance metrics, or using population long-term past. They use population or full historical data, means not just a small sample. They reflect the long-term actual performance, including all real-world variation. They describe the process based on past performance, which is mean PP measures overall performance potential, while the PPK, which uh, checks how well the process is centered and performing based on past data. Now next. In In the Total Quality Management or TQM, PP or Process Performance and PPK or Process Performance Index are key statistical tools used to evaluate how well a process is performing, or especially in manufacturing or service quality context. PP and PPK are similar to CP and CPK, but there are key difference in how they are calculated and used. On next. The first one is PP, process performance. Is a statistical measurement of the overall capability of a process, calculated by comparing the spread between the upper and lower specification limit or USL and LSL to actual spread of the process output using overall standard deviation. It measures the potential ability of process to meet specification without considering whether the process mean is centered, which is mean PP is measure how much a process variation fits within the specification limit without considering whether the process average is centered. It's only focus the wide or consistency of the process. A higher PP means the variation is small and process can comfortability uh, fit fit within the allowed range. This is the formula. PP equal USL minus LSL divided by 6 variation. The purpose of PP is tell us how well the process can perform in the short term, assuming it is stable but not necessarily centered. Okay, next. This is the PPK. Process Performance Index is a statistical measurement that evaluates both of spread of the process and its centered relatives of specification limit. It measures the actual performance of the process by considering how far the process mean is from the nearest specification limit adjusted for overall variation. Meaning PPK measures both the process variation and how centered the process mean it's relative to specification limit. It checks not only if the spread is acceptable but also if the output properly aligned with the target. A high PPK value means the process is both consistent and centered. This is the formula of PPK. PPK mean and USL minus mean and divided by 3 variation, and mean minus LSL divided by 3 variation. Purpose, it gives a realistic performance index showing how close the process is the desired target. If the process ship PPK will the lower than PP. In short, the PP tells us if the process is consistent, while the PPK tells us if the process consistent and accurately centered within the accurate required limit. Okay, next. This is the example given. Scenario, making cookies. A bakery wants each cookies to weigh 100 grams. From this data, average mean is 100 grams. Standard variation is approximately 1.58 grams. Upper specification limit or USL is 105 grams, and lower specification limit is LSL or 95 grams. Target weight is 100 grams. The weight of the cookies is 98 grams and 99 grams and 100 grams, 101 grams and 105 grams. This is the weight of cookies. And in the picture, will show the limit or LSL of cookies, which is 95 grams, and USL is 105 grams. Next. This is the next one. There is a bell curve normal distribution centered at 100 grams, which is the target weight of the cookies. Horizontal axis bottom. This is the visual of weight of cookies, which is the first one is 90, 98 grams, 99 grams, 100 grams, 101 grams, and 102 grams. This is the actual weight of the cookies that were measured. Vertical line at mean show that the average mean is exactly at 100 grams. The center. Next. Is using PP. PP process performance index that measure the overall potential of your process based on the spread operation of actual data. Next. This is the computation using formula of PP. Now this is the formula. PP equal USL minus LSL divided by 6 and standard variation, where the USL upper specification limit is equal 105 grams and LSL is lower specification limit equals 95 grams, and using standard variation is 1.58 grams. This is the substituting the values. PP equal 105 minus 95 and divided by 6 times 1.58 equals 110 divided by 9.48 equal 1.05. In the meaning the process is capable the spread of cookies weight it is small enough to meet the specification limit, meaning the which is mean the process spread variation is good, not too wide. Next. Using PPK process performance capability index. PPK measures how well the process actually performs, including if the process is centered up or shifted. Next. This is the computation using a PPK formula. PPK mean USL minus mean divided by 3 standard variation, and mean minus LSL divided by 3 standard variation. So the first part is 105 minus 100 divided by 3 times 1.58, which is the our standard variation, equal is 5, and divided by 4.74 equal 1.05. The second part is minus 100 minus 95 divided by 3 times 1.58 equal 5 divided by equal is 5 divided by 4.74 is equal 4.5. Our minimum PPK is mean is 1.05 and 1.05. The same answer is equal 1.05. Since the mean exactly the target 100 grams, the process is centered and PP equal PPK and equal PP. This means that not only is the spread small enough, but the average cookie weight is also properly centered between the limit, meaning the process is not only low variation but also centered, no shift to left or right. Next. The last one is this is the summary or final answer. The cookies weigh 100 grams with an acceptable range between 95 grams and 105 grams. After measuring 5 cookies, which is 98 grams and 99 grams, 100 grams, 101 grams, and 102 grams, the average weight was exactly 100 grams, and the standard deviation was approximately 1.58 grams. The process performance index or PP was calculated to be 1.05, indicating that the variation in cookie weight is small and well within the specification limit. The process performance capability index or PPK was also 1.05, showing that the process is centered and the cookies are not biased toward being too light or too heavy. Overall, the bakery's cookies production process is consistent, well controlled, and meeting the desired quality standard. Both of PP and PPK values were good, showing the cookie making process is consistent, well controlled, and meet quality standard, which is mean the baker's cookies are consistent, properly centered, and weight, and meet the quality standard with both a PP and PPK showing good control. The last one, next. The last one I will
So
show.
today we're going to deep dive into very important concept in statistics, that is process capability. What is this CP, CPK, PP, and PPK? We look at all these terms in this video with the help of some animated video examples. So please stay tuned. Don't go anywhere else. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy this video. Before we understand the process capability, let us understand the process. In simple terms, process is a series of action or steps performed on input to produce an output. Let's take an example describing the process of making a cup of tea. From input side, we have electric kettle filled with water. Then we process this called a brewing by adding tea and allowing water to boil in electric kettle. An output could be in the form of we pouring the tea into the cup. This is a very simple input output process diagram. Please remember, almost every process can be divided into input, process, and output. Now let us understand the process capability. So process capability refers to an inherent ability of a process to produce similar parts for sustained period of time under the given set of conditions. That is a definition of process capability. But before determining the process capability, we need to make sure the process is stable. That means the variations observed is only due to the common cause only, and no special cause of variation exists. And the process is predictable and consistent over time. But if the process is unstable, it might exhibit certain shift, trends, or cycle, making it difficult to assess its process capability. Second is if the data is normally distributed. This means that the process follows a normal distribution, which we also known as the bell curve. If the data collected from the process doesn't fit a normal distribution, it might indicate that the process is not predictable or consistent, making it difficult to assess its capability accurately. Once the process is both normal and stable, its capability can be evaluated effectively using the various statistical methods such as CP, CPK, PP, and PPK. These measures help determine whether the process can consistently meet the specific requirements and whether the adjustment or improvement are necessary. We also need the large number of samples to ensure accurate and reliable assessment. So in process capability, we use two indices, CP, CPK, PP, and PPK to determine whether the process is capable or not. So CP and CPK are called process capability matrix, while the PP and PPK are called process performance metrics. In both these cases, we want to verify if the process can meet the customer requirement, that is CTQ. So process capability CP and CPK uses samples for evaluation and are generally short terms and tell us how the process will perform in the future. While PP and BPK uses the population and are generally long term and tell us how the process has performed in the past. So CP and PP measures how well the data fits the specification limit, that is upper specification limit and the lower specification limit. While CPK and PPK measures how centered the data is between the specification limit. Now let us understand this concept of CP, CPK, PP and PPK using some animations. Imagine that you are driving a car and trying to park the car in the parking space. The parking space here represents the specification limit, upper specification limit and the lower specification limit. In the car that you have, its outer dimension represents the control limit, upper control limit and the lower control limit. So we cannot change the specification limit because these are derived from the customer directive. What we can control is the control limit, that is the upper control limit and the lower control limit. So let's take the first case when the car dimension, upper control limit and the lower control limit are small and car can be easily parked inside the parking space. So that means your specification limit is larger than your control limits. The other scenario in same situation could be when the car is off-centered. Even though it is small, but it is off-centered. That is, it is likely shifted to one side of the walls, which is equivalent to producing a defective part. So our goal here is to make sure the car is narrower and also well centered. Now second case could be when the car size is almost equal to the parking space. That means the specification limit is same as the control limit. For this, you either need an expert driver to park your car without hitting the side walls and also to do that consistently for next probably 30 days or 60 days, but not for a normal driver. So we will be producing parts at risk every day. So some parts may go out of specification, some parts will still be within the specification limit. This is kind of a risky scenario. The third case could be when the car is too wide, it won't even fit in the parking space. That means your control limits are actually wider than the specification limit. In this scenario, you will be producing parts which are always out of the spec and won't be accepted by the customer. Let's understand some more scenarios like this case where we have the specification limit. So the driver here is unsteady. Car often scraps the wall and you will see it will produce more defective parts unless the process width is reduced and the process is centered. In this case, CP is equal to 0.7 and CPK is around 0.7, which is not a capable process. Second case could be when your driver is still unsteady, but it is better than what was in the case 1. He often comes too close to the boundaries, the specification limits, right? And you are likely to have defect unless the process width here is also reduced. So here the CP and CPK is though 1, but I would call it as a barely capable because there is always a risk of hitting the side walls. Third case could be when the driver is still unable to center the car, but he is consistent always too close to one side. And in this case, it is the lower specification limit. You are likely to have a defect unless the process is centered. In this case, your CP could be 1.5 because it is still very narrow, but CPK is 0.7 because it is shifted towards the lower specification limit. The fourth case, and again, it is not capable. The fourth case could be when the driver always parks successfully without scraping the sides. The process is centered as well and narrow. You are unlikely to have defects even if the process shifts slightly to the other side. This is the best case where CP is 2 and CPK is also close to 2. And this is the highly capable process. The CP of 2 means a Six Sigma process. Let's look at some formulas to calculate CP and CPK. So for CP, the formula is upper specification minus lower specification divided by process width. That is 6 sigma. That is ULSL minus LSL divided by 6 sigma. For CPK, it is distance from mean to the nearest specification limit divided by distance from the mean to the process edge. So it is, in short, it is the min of x bar, that is the average, minus lower specification limit divided by 3 sigma, or upper specification limit minus x bar divided by 3 sigma. So this is how you calculate the CP and CPK. So let's take the first example to understand this concept. A process has a mean of 45.5 and a standard deviation of 0.9. product has a specification of 45 plus minus 3. Find the CP and CPK. So this is the scenario. So this is how we plot in the graph. So we need to calculate the lower specification limit and the upper specification limit, which comes from the 45 plus minus 3. We calculate lower and upper specification. Mean here is slightly shifted, like actual mean from specification is 45, but the actual process mean is 45.5. Now let's see the formula for CP is lowest upper specification minus lower specification limit divided by 6 sigma, and CPK is mean of mean minus lower specification limit by 3 sigma, or upper specification limit minus mean divided by 3 sigma. So whichever is less is your CPK. So for CP, let's put the values 48, which is coming from 45 plus 3, and 42 is coming from 45 minus 3, the specification limit which is given in the question, divided by 6 into 0.9. So we get CP as 1.11. Now for CPK, we put the values min as 45.5 is the process mean which is given, minus 42 which is the lower specification, divided by 3 into 0.9, or 48 is the upper specification minus 45.5 divided by 3 into 0.9. So we get CP as mean of 1.3 or 0.93. So we choose the minimum value out of these two. So out of which minimum is 0.93. So CPK is 0.93. That means it is shifted towards the one side. So which is not capable. So we need, for process to be capable, we need both CP and CPK greater than 1. In this case, even though CP is greater than 1, but CPK is less than 1. So process is not capable. However, by adjusting the mean, if you can shift the mean, process can become capable here. Let's take a second example. Process has a mean of 70 and a standard deviation of 2. The product has a lower specification limit of 58 and upper specification limit of 82. Now you need to find CP and CPK here. So this is the scenario, like you have given the lower specification and upper specification mean at 70. For CP, the formula is again upper specification limit minus lower specification limit divided by 6 sigma. We put the values, we get CP as 2. Let's calculate now CPK, which is mean of mean minus lower specification divided by 3 sigma, or upper specification minus mean divided by 3 sigma. We put the values, we get CP as mean of 2 or 2, which is actually same. So we get CPK as 2 here. So in this case, we can say the process is highly capable because both CP and CPK are greater than 1, and actually it is 2. So it is equivalent to 6 sigma process.
What is SPC software? If you have ever wondered how manufacturers maintain consistent quality in their products, you are in the right place. Today, we will discuss statistical process control software and its role in achieving quality control. Statistical process control software is a tool that helps organizations monitor and control their processes using statistical methods. This software is particularly important in manufacturing, where maintaining quality is essential. At its core, statistical process control involves collecting data from a process and analyzing it to determine if everything is operating within acceptable limits. This helps identify variations in the process. There are two types of variations to consider: common cause variation, which is natural to the process, and special cause variation, which indicates a problem that needs attention. One of the key components of statistical process control is control charts. These are graphical tools that display data over time, helping to identify trends, shifts, or anomalies in the process. With control charts, operators can quickly see if something is going wrong and take action before it becomes a bigger issue. SPC software is designed to efficiently handle the collection, analysis, and visualization of process data. It typically includes features such as real-time data collection from various sources like sensors and machinery. This ensures that measurements are accurate and up to date. The software analyzes the collected data to identify patterns or trends, often using algorithms to detect any special cause variations. Another important feature of SPC software is control chart generation. The software can automatically create control charts, like XBAR charts or P charts, based on the type of data being monitored. This saves time and ensures that the charts are accurate and up to date. Many SPC software solutions also include alert systems that notify operators when data points fall outside control limits. This proactive approach helps prevent defects before they occur. In practical applications, SPC software is widely used in manufacturing to monitor production processes. It helps ensure that products meet specifications by controlling variability in processes like machining, assembly, or packaging. By identifying and addressing special causes of variation, SPC software supports continuous quality improvement. This leads to reduced defects and waste, ultimately resulting in cost savings and increased customer satisfaction. The benefits of using SPC software are numerous. It improves product consistency by maintaining processes within control limits, ensuring that products consistently meet quality standards. Additionally, early detection of issues reduces waste and minimizes the need for rework. This proactive management leads to more efficient production processes, which can significantly impact a company's bottom line. In the context of statistical quality control, SPC software plays a vital role in maintaining control charts and implementing statistical process control principles. It provides the necessary tools for collecting and analyzing data, enabling organizations to optimize their processes and improve overall quality. By utilizing SPC software, businesses can achieve higher levels of efficiency and quality in their operations.
SPC software application. Statistical Process Control or SPC software is crucial tool in manufacturing and business environments for real-time data analysis. It helps identify patterns, monitor performance, and detects defects and efficiencies. It generates control charts, alerts, and reports, enabling immediate corrective actions widely used in industrial like automotive, pharmaceuticals, and electronics. It ensures consistent quality and regulatory compliance. So SPC Statistical Process Control Software is a tool used to monitor and control processes in various industries. It helps to track data in real time, detect variation and anomalies, identify trends and patterns, and improve quality and reduce defects. Next slide. SPC workflow. Data collection. Data collection involves systematically gathering relevant process, measurements, and recording them for analysis using control charts. This data is then used to identify patterns, trends, and anomalies in the process, allowing for continuous improvement and better control of the process variation. Workflow data collective involves gathering data from a process to monitor and control its performance. This process starts with identifying the relevant data sources such as temperature, pressure, and dimension, and then collecting data from sensor, instruments, or manual measurements. The collected data is recorded and stored in a database or spreadsheet for analysis. SPC software is then used to analyze the data, detect variation, and identify trends or patterns. The ultimate goal of SPC workflow data collection is to monitor process performance, detect anomalies, and improve quality by using data insights to optimize the process and reduce defects. Next slide.
Data analysis involves a structured approach to data collection, analysis, and action. Use a statistical method to monitor and improve process quality. It is continuous improvement method that helps in identify variation in a process, enabling better control and optimization. Next, alerts. Alerts are automated notification triggered by specific event or data pattern that indicate potentially issue or opportunities for improvement in a process. This, these alerts can im- inform users, typically production personnel or quality manager, of, of out of control condition data, consistency, or when a specific process, step, or rule has been abolished.
Next slide. SPC workflow reporting. Reporting involves using statistical process control or SPC tools and data to monitor and improve a process. It focuses on identifying and correcting variation in a process to ensure consistent quality by tracking data or control charge. Organization can identify trends, shifts, and patterns that might indicate problem with the process. Next slide. Action. Actions are taken based on the analysis of data collected from a process using tools like control charts to identify and address variation of improved process stability and quality. These actions aim to ensure the process operates within its desired specification and produce conforming product consistently. Next slide po.
In the key SPC tools, histogram in SPC, a histogram is a graphical tool that display the frequency distribute data showing how many times a specific value or range of values occurs within a dataset. It is provides a visual snapshot of process variation, highlighting the most common values, the separate of data, the shape of distribution. Imagine measuring the diameter of manufacturer parts. A, a histogram should be showed how many parts fall within each diameter range. The most common diameter, the amount of variation in diameter, the shape of the diameter distribution. Next, Pareto chart. A Pareto chart is key SPC tools that visualize represent the frequency and impact of different types of effect or problems. It helps prioritize issue by showing which problems contribution the most of the overall problem. Pareto charts are based on Pareto principle, also known as the 20 by 80 by 20 rule, which suggests that a small res- percentage of causes contribute to a large percentage of the effects. Imagine a manufacturing company is experience a high number of defects in their products. A Pareto chart could be used to identify the most common types of defects and their frequency. For example, the chart might show the 60% of defects are should to operator errors, while 20% are due to machine malfunction. This information should be help the company focus its improvement efforts and reducing operators errors and addressing the machine maintenance issue. Next,
Scatter diagram. Scatter diagrams are graphical representation used to display the relationship between two numerical variables. A scatter diagram shows the relationship between two variables. Each point on the plot represents a single observation, with its position determined by the values of the two variables. By looking at the pattern of points, you can see if there is positive, negative, or no relationship between the variables. This helps identify connection and trends in the data, making it easier to understand and make decisions. Next slide po. Process capability analysis. Process capability analysis assessing the ability of the process to meet specified requirements or specification. Process capability measures how well a process meets specification by evaluating its natural variation. It assesses if the process produces output within acceptable limits. Consider both spread centering. Think of a golfer accuracy. Can they consistently hit the target? By understanding the process capability, you can improve processes, reducing defects, and ensure quality and reliability. Next slide.
Minitab is a statistical software package primarily used for the data analysis, particularly in fields like Six Sigma and quality improvement. It is allowed user to input data, perform various statistical analysis, the visualize findings through graphs and charts. Minitabs is known for its user-friendly interface, making it accessible to both beginners and experienced users. Next. Next. Uh, Infinity QS is a company that provides software solution for manufacturers to implement real-time statistical process control. This software automates data collection and data enabling manufacturers to make data-driven decisions and improve their manufacturing process. Next.
SPC for Excel. Real-time SPC monitoring, great for manufacturing plants. SPC for Excel is a software tool that integrates statistical process controller (SPC) techniques with Microsoft Excel. It enables users to analyze data, create control charts, monitor process performance, and identify trends and variations. By using SPC for Excel, users can leverage familiar Excel functionality while applying SPC methods to improve quality, reduce defect, and optimize processes. Next slide po. Common SPC software application, the Suntex Synergy SPC. Real-time dashboard, strong for quality assurance team. Suntex Synergy SPC is a software tool that helps manufacturers improve quality and productivity by collecting and analyzing data, creating control charts, and monitoring processes in real time. Next slide.
In summary, the control charts monitor process performance and it identify the normal versus abnormal variation, the common cause variation, and the special variation. And in profit and the process capability, this measures how well a process meets the specifications, and this ensure consistent quality output to meet the expectation of the customer needs. And SPC software applications is automate data collection and analysis, and it enable real-time decision making. And together, they drive continuous improvement and quality excellence. And in conclusion, control charts, process capability, and SPC software applications are vital tools in total quality management. They help monitor process, reduce variation, and ensure quality, consistent quality, and together they drive continuous improvement to strengthen decision making and to support a culture of excellence across the organization. And that's all, and thank you. At the last, these are the references of the topic that were discussed. And together we are group one, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.